Hey guys, and welcome to Politics Snaps. Now I'm about to show you an interview I did with Jamie Bartlett. He's a journalist and author. He wrote The Dark Net, Radicals, People versus Tech is his latest book. He specialises in tech journalism and also in kind of radical fringe political movements. And in his latest book he argues that modern technology could potentially be undermining our democracy and indeed undermine democracy in general. So he's a really interesting guy, he says some really interesting stuff, so I hope you enjoy. If you do, please leave a like and please do subscribe. And thank you very much for your time. Yeah, so Jamie, thanks a lot for joining us. So I'll start with something kind of quite simple. I mean, it seems to me that, obviously you've read, I've written quite a few books now. It seems to me there's kind of like a theme going through all of them, which is tech is going to have a very dramatic impact on kind of human society and politics. That's going to allow radical groups that had previously been fringe to become mainstream, and that could threaten democracy. Do you kind of think of the three as a trilogy or as separate entities?
Yeah, the first two, Darknet and Radicals, are definitely related, because I think I took the idea of the Darknet as being, let's go and look into these weird fringe movements online. They're far more interesting than people realise, they're not quite as they seem, and the mainstream can learn something from them. And I thought, well, I'll apply that same kind of methodology of getting into these groups, hanging out with them, because it's a fun way of researching and writing books as well, spending time with people. And I thought I'll apply that to politics more generally, hence the Radicals book, which is essentially like the Darknet in its structure, chapters about groups and the big ideas, but carried through a story of a person or a particular sort of moment. But the most recent one, the People versus Tech, is a bit more opinionated. It's a bit more my opinion. The first two are straightforward sort of journalistic efforts at being objective and telling a story and heavily researched, whereas People versus Tech I think is a bit more of a polemic. It's sort of making a clear argument about the tensions between the internet and democracy.
I mean, it's really interesting that tensions come around now, because if you went back sort of 4 or 5 years back to say 2011, like the Arab Spring time, there's a lot of optimism about tech, a view that kind of it would be a great force of liberal democracy, it would spread to other parts of the world. And recently, particularly I guess since 2016 and Trump, we seem to kind of gone the other way, and there's a lot of pessimism. Do you think that reflects like recent events, or do you think that that's because of technological changes? Or
yeah, I think it's an interesting question about what's behind what is clearly a sort of shift in opinion about whether technology is good or bad for individual freedom and society. I think we can all agree it's generally good for convenience, and in many ways for like just personal well-being. Yeah. But the sort of societal effects it's having are, in 2011 I think there was a lot of misplaced optimism, a little bit of naivety really, and that which goes all the way back to the 90s, about the idea that technology was almost by definition, simply by creating a network, allowing people to communicate with each other, will get freer and will get more informed, and the democracies of the world will flourish, the authoritarian regimes will collapse because they won't be able to control information. And I think we're all a bit naive about how big, powerful authoritarian governments would co-opt these technologies. Okay. So I don't think it's just the election of Trump has turned everyone against tech. There is a bit of that. I mean, there's definitely a sort of, I would say, double standard at play, where when Barack Obama uses online advertising to target people, it's brilliant and innovative. When Donald Trump does it, it's evil and malicious and sinister. So there's a bit of that going on. But I think there's also, really in the last 5 years, and this is a kind of weird pet theory of mine, a lot of the people that have created this tech or have been real pioneers in developing it, who were often quite frankly in their 20s when they were first building these platforms, like you, suddenly now find themselves a few years on in their early 30s, mid 30s, late 30s like me, with little children, with young kids, and they're suddenly looking at these kids staring at their screens all day and thinking, my goodness me, what have we unleashed onto the world? Yeah. So I think there's a few like weird personal reasons that the mood has shifted. And then of course I think you've just got we're beginning to understand and appreciate just the sheer level of disruption that is going on now. What's happening to our economy, what's happening to our high street in the last few weeks, what's happening to potentially swathes of jobs through automation, what's happening to our taxi service, what's happening to the ability of law and order or criminal justice system to properly prosecute crime. And I think we're beginning to be quite scared of the future because it suddenly feels very uncertain, and humans tend to be more at ease with dystopian imagined futures because it's easier than the positive utopian ideas.
I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned about kind of authoritarian regimes co-opting modern technology very effectively. I mean, do you think that some parts of modern technology, so I mean, I'm thinking particularly social media, could undermine liberal democracies more than authoritarian regimes? So that seems counterintuitive, but I guess it kind of in a way also makes sense.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, look, in a couple of ways as well. Democracies, as is often said, are sort of the institutions of democracy are often quite almost naturally unstable, and so it's far easier for a Russian government to try to intervene and meddle in public opinion debates and elections than vice versa. Without the checks and balances and stuff, an authoritarian regime can I guess has more leeway to do that kind of thing. But I think there's something deeper going on here as well. A genuine possibility that democracy is not the most efficient and effective way of running a society, which is all about big data, smart machines, and connected devices. For a long time, we've always thought that democracies are the sort of the best system of ensuring economic growth and individual well-being. For lots of reasons it has been, especially this sort of circular, self-reinforcing relationship between individual liberty and economic growth to kind of feed each other. Is that going to be the case in a world of smart machines and big data? Or is it the case that perhaps countries like China, who have none of this pesky privacy law to worry about, who don't have to worry about limits on surveillance, so they can more easily maintain law and order in their society, who can shift great swathes of the economy around quickly and easily where they might need to if there's great turbulence in the economy. I mean, we might need to consider whether it's China that wins the great artificial intelligence race, which everyone says is so important. Putin said the same, because they can more easily extract, use, test and centralise computing power and data. And I think that's a genuine thing that we should be worried about.
Okay. And would you say that for the first time since the Cold War, kind of the liberal democratic model is facing a coherent ideological challenge? Because obviously there used to be a kind of coherent challenge by communism that people took seriously, and socialism. That kind of fell away after that 1990. For a few years it seemed that there
was no alternative.
Exactly, but in the last few years, authoritarian countries started doing very well, and authoritarian models started spreading in places like Turkey, Philippines, Russia, even Poland, Hungary. So do you think we're facing a kind of coherent ideological challenge for the first time since the Cold War?
Yes, but that's often talked about. This kind of state capitalist, so it's still sort of capitalist, but it's a state-run economy in many ways. It's authoritarian in lots of ways. It's often talked about outside of what's going on with technology, because it's been developing and evolving for a while, and obviously people have looked at the levels of economic growth in China and thought, blimey, there is a kind of alternative here, and liberal democracies seem to be so useless in many ways at solving problems. Maybe that is the alternative, but I think it's gonna evolve a lot more in the next 10 to 20 years, that model. And if that model becomes integrated with huge investment in smart machines, software, big data analysis, central government run sort of centres of cyber excellence, then that model becomes, I think, potentially even more powerful.
Okay. I mean, it kind of links on to, I know you've written quite a lot about the transhumanist movement in certainly a couple of your books.
Interesting group.
I find it absolutely fascinating, but I guess it's kind of interesting subject in where the main developments happen in the kind of, if you think the transhumanist revolution is inevitable, which obviously people do, or even if it's going to be far more gradual than I think it's going to be, where the main developments happen, and if they happen in China rather than in the West, Well, I mean, that could just have such a huge impact on the world in just every imaginable way.
Yeah, transhumanism being this kind of extension of human capabilities. And I think that we are, Francis Fukuyama said it was the most dangerous idea in the world a few years back, because it takes away from the idea that, in a sense, all humans in some ways are created equally and will be of equal value. And if you suddenly have some rich people that can afford the technology to immediately speak 20 languages and live for an extra 100 years and maintain their vitality and intellectual faculties longer than everybody else, then you're going to have this new type of inequality, which is based on like physiological differences as well. And I think we in the West will have lots of moral qualms about that. I think we'll be nervous about these developments and we will restrict it and we'll limit it. And countries like China won't. They'll just keep steaming ahead. This is a concern, I think, that people had during the Cold War as well, though. They said, but democracies are weak and the Soviet Union will do whatever it wants. And so they're bound to beat us in the great economic race. And they didn't. Yeah. So it's not certain, but I think it is something that we need to seriously worry about and figure out how we can stay ahead in the great technological arms race, especially with artificial intelligence, while simultaneously having regulations and restrictions on that technology. We need to respect people's privacy, we need to have limits on data collection. We've got this new GDPR legislation that's come out to try to help do that. I'm sure we'll have more. We're definitely going to spend more time regulating technology in the coming years because people seem to be worried about that. And we've got to do all that so people don't start smashing the machines up. Yeah. But we've got to do that while simultaneously still being the best in the world at it. And that to me is our great challenge. I don't propose in my books I have great answers to this. It's very easy, I suppose, for me to just say, these are all the terrible problems, we've got to figure them out. But I'm hoping somebody will.
I mean, do you think, so obviously you kind of mentioned that transhumanism, at least initially, it's going to result in, or likely to result in far greater inequality than we currently have, i.e. it's going to be available to a section of the population but not the whole population. I mean, do you think that democracy would still be compatible with such a society? I mean, if the disparity in ability is so much greater than it is at the moment, could we still have a one person, one vote system?
We have no idea, do we? Yeah. We've never had to think about this kind of issue. I mean, we went through it before when... The way that Francis Fukuyama talks about it is that it might become like it was when the franchise was first being extended and people were saying, but you can't give women the full vote because they're incapable of thinking properly, and then you can't give working class people the vote because they have no stake in society, so they'll vote irresponsibly. And we might have this weird rerun of those arguments about the idea that some humans become like of another level of capability and capacity to others based on all the upgrades they've managed to do to their bodies and their minds. And these are questions for 50 years, 100 years down the line that I think are interesting speculations at the moment, but I can't see how we would easily let go of the idea of one person, one vote. Yeah. Quite so easily as that. I think we'll be knocked out by an asteroid or catastrophic climate change before we get to that. Okay. That's a nice thought, isn't it?
I guess coming back to what you said literally a moment ago about more authoritarian societies in some ways having competitive advantages in that, I don't know if I can possibly play into this debate as well, in more authoritarian society, if it's comfortable with, as having used transhumanist technology, would be comfortable having some people being vastly more intelligent than others and those people kind of running the show, as it were. And that society may be more competitive than one like ours, where we have one person, one vote, because you have people of vastly superior intelligence. Well, not at the moment, there's a disparity of intelligence between the human race, but it's relative, and this would be like nothing we've seen before. So do you think that could give authoritarian states an advantage? I know I'm probably going off the tangent now. But...
Yeah, well, the way I look at it, the sort of starting point for this debate is that with the powerful software, with powerful technology, whoever owns it and whoever knows how to work it and how to make best use of it will see dramatic improvements in their productivity, their ability to monitor people, control society, make loads of money, whatever their goal is, they'll be able to do it better when armed with smart machines. So you could see that running out in a number of different ways. I mean, you could just see that the first problem we'll face is actually just widespread inequality of the type we're familiar with, only getting worse, because there'll be a load of great jobs in software engineering and robotics that are really well paid for people with PhD students in computer science, and then they'll own all the assets and all the money and all the data, and then loads of other people that don't know what the hell's going on with rubbish jobs. And that would be enough of a problem for a democracy, because a democracy really struggles with that level of inequality in a way maybe that authoritarianism is able to keep a lid on. And so that is, to me, is a more obvious and more immediate problem.
Okay. I mean, I was very struck by a sentence from your book Radicals, which is, the lesson of history is that today's radicals often become tomorrow's mainstream. I was wondering if any of the, obviously you followed lots of different radical movements in the book, and kind of some movements on fringe movements basically. Are there any of them in particular which you think are becoming mainstream or likely to become mainstream? I guess the 5-star movement's the obvious one because it's now in government.
Yeah, the 5-star movement was in the book, and now they're in government, and they were kind of radical when I was spending time with them. I suppose that sentence should almost have been written the other way around, which is that, because a lot of radical movements don't go anywhere either, they're evolutionary dead ends. And a more accurate sentence is that a lot of those groups that are mainstream now were once upon a time radical.
Yeah,
that's a more accurate description.
I mean, all of them, I suppose.
Pretty much all of them, if you go back far enough. And so I'm almost sort of taking a bit of a lucky dip here and just choosing some which I think happen to be interesting, some of which I think will become more popular and more influential, either by maybe taking over, maybe winning elections, like in the case of Italy, or, I mean, I spent a lot of time following Tommy Robinson, from the former EDL leader, around, and he's become way more popular and successful even since I wrote that book. I followed him all over Europe, and he's already made a sort of dent in a way that I think people have been surprised by. But also those movements which nudge the mainstream, just sort of influence the bigger parties to shift their position a little bit. That's another way that radical movements have an effect. I mean, hardline environmentalism, which a while ago seemed like a completely wacky idea, to me increasingly looks a bit more sensible when you look at where things are heading. And you just seen how the Conservative Party under David Cameron suddenly was very green, suddenly trying to sell itself as a green party. Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party is selling itself as a green party, and I mean, all the parties pretty much would now say, no, we care about the environment, we want to do something. They're not shifting as far as these radical environmentalists that I was hanging out with, who want to shut down all the coal mines, but they've moved. And they've moved partly because there's these radical people talking about it all the time, getting people interested in the subject. And I think in a way that's a healthier way of doing it. You have these fringe groups, and they just shift opinion a little bit, and we adapt, and the mainstream parties adopt their positions, co-opt some of their ideas, and that's quite a nice, natural way that democracies are supposed to work. So if you're asking me about very specific ones, then I would say the next 5 years I fear we'll see quite a lot of quite hardline anti-tech movements, sort of really smashing the machines up. We will see in the next 10 or 20 years radical environmentalism becoming more militant, because I think there's a tragic tragic dynamic there where people won't do anything about the environment really until it's too late. So militant environmentalists will get more and more hardline and believe that the ends justify the means. And then further away down the line, it's going to have to be parties that really get to grips with what technology is doing to society. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, or how that would split left and right, or whether that just completely smashes the left and right dichotomy. But I think they're kind of the interesting questions, and you can see the Tory party sometimes trying to think about how do we regulate tech, and should we be worried about digital monopolies, or are we quite happy that it's driving down costs and it's good for consumers? So we don't really want to be. There's a very interesting split in the Conservative Party between those who are kind of very behind the TfL decision on Uber it's changed, obviously it's won its appeal, but
sure.
to renounce its license, because they thought that there needed to be these companies needed to abide by the laws that we have, and the governments need to have the power to sort of kick these companies into order. And those who thought, no, but this is brilliant for consumers, and consumers want it, and we as the Conservative Party should be behind that.
Yeah.
So the party itself was quite divided on that little issue of Uber and TfL, and I see that as a beginning of a much bigger split in the Conservative Party about technology and its role in society.
Okay. Well, do you think
people like you are going to have to worry about this, right? Because your thing is
on the right.
It's on the right.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You are going to have to worry, and your generation is going to have to worry about this.
Certainly in my time, it's a partly an age thing. Young kind of Conservative people tend to be very Uber friendly. Some of the older ones less so. I mean, do you think this could end up splitting?
Wait until you're in charge.
Yeah.
And then you suddenly think, hang on, I want my government to be able to just set the rules here.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the very interesting things you mentioned earlier is the anti-Islam movement, which you were very, you spent a lot of time following around Europe, etc. Yeah. And obviously, five-star movement has become the mainstream. We can agree on that. But in Italy, at least, the anti-Islam movement seems to be verging on the mainstream in a number of European countries and arguably United States of America. So obviously with Trump in America, with Liga in Italy, with Freedom Party in Austria, and a whole bunch which are kind of just below the mainstream threshold. Do you think we're on the verge of that becoming completely mainstream and normal? Is this kind of one of the big new ideological trends, and does that concern you?
It's very hard with this question because each country has a slightly different expression of this because it's a combination of factors mixed up together here. It's fear of immigration and especially integration. It's fear of Islam and a belief that European culture is somehow under threat, and it's going to become more under threat in the years ahead. Yeah. Wrapped up with a belief that the authorities are out of touch and they don't listen to ordinary people, and there's a sort of cultural Marxism and a liberal left dominance of cultural and media institutions, and a belief that working class people are silenced every time they go on the streets and try and express any of their concerns. All of those things are sort of jumbled up in the anti-Islam movement. Yeah. And which makes it quite hard to predict where it's actually going to go, because if when the anti-Islam movement also becomes part of a broader anti-establishment movement, i.e. those people who are running things are so out of touch with ordinary people's concerns, it can go to a whole nother level, which is I think what happened with Donald Trump. Yeah. He's talking about Islam and protecting the culture, as he talks about, but his popularity is also driven by the belief there's loads of liberals running Washington and ordinary Americans are getting left behind. So those two things don't necessarily need to be part of the same message or narrative, but they have almost become that. A lot of the anti-establishment parties have kind of become slightly anti-Islam parties. And so...
Do you think that's comparable with a lot of the anti-establishment parties being anti-Semitic in the 20s and 30s, or do you think it's kind of a completely different phenomenon?
It's a good question. It's a good question because in my experience, having spent time with these groups, it's quite a broad spectrum within them. Yeah. You do get hardcore racists, but you also get a lot of people that really aren't racist, and they're worried. They don't have good jobs. They don't come from a particularly nice end of town. They're nervous about where the country's going. They also enjoy getting out together and feeling like they're part of a movement. Yeah. Is that the same as anti-Semitic movements in the 20s? I mean, a lot of them say they're Democrats and they believe in free speech and they're pro-LGBT rights. Some of them are using that as cover. Yeah. Some of them genuinely believe it. So I find them far more interesting than the critics say, because there is that spectrum of difference of opinions. And the problem is, the real difficulty is, if you just point at them and call them racists, which is kind of what a lot of people do, I really think all you do is fan the flames, because a lot of them aren't racist, and if you call them a racist, they'll just say, look, you're not listening again, you're ignoring us, you're demeaning us, you're patronising and smearing us. And that is what has happened. And I think that is how Tommy Robinson has become a kind of free speech martyr.
Okay.
Because we've played into that and we didn't need to. And that's very frustrating. There's a lot of reasons to criticise people like Tommy Robinson, loads of reasons, and I've written about them in the book.
Sure.
Racist I don't think that's one of them. I think he's unfairly labelled in that way.
I was reading a report, literally this morning by Hope Not Hate, which are kind of like the anti-fascism group, and they were arguing that essentially over the last year or two we've seen a kind of coalescing of street movements, political parties in the form of UKIP, which seems to be becoming more radical in the post-Brexit era, and the kind of the online world.
But that's also UKIP because they're getting further away from power. So you get more radical as you get further away, and then you moderate the closer you get. But yeah, sorry.
But under Gerald Batten, they've become. Gerald Batten's been supporting Tommy Robinson very openly, getting him into. He's been turning up at his rallies, etc. Do you think it's a kind of like coherent? In the UK specifically, do you think it's a kind of coherent movement developing with UKIP being kind of the political wing, moving in anti-Islam direction, with various different street movements being the street wing, and with quite a strong online. So for example, I'm thinking the last week, Paul Joseph Watson and Milo Yiannopoulos, a couple of others joined UKIP.
Yeah. Oh, did they? I didn't even know that. Oh, right.
There was a few, and Saga.
Yeah, but Paul Joseph, he's a conspiracy theorist. This is not serious stuff.
But
it's not to say, it's not to say that he doesn't have a big following. But the some of his ideas are, they're just ludicrous. Yeah. But that is not the EDL. Yeah. The EDL is sort of a bit of a spent force. It feels like it's just sort of spread out, and it's sort of harder to understand at the moment where it is. It's without using the sort of Tony Blair expression that the kaleidoscope has been shaken up and we wait to see where the pieces settle. Feels a little bit like that at this point, with UKIP sort of imploding, some of these online personalities, including Tommy Robinson, getting bigger, the two things kind of coming together. They'll disagree on a lot of different issues, they'll agree on certain things, especially we all hate the liberal lefties. Yeah. And if you've got a common enemy, you can kind of get around that. But you've also got to understand, I think, that these got for a very long time, and I wrote about this in in all of my books really, a belief that people like this wouldn't know how to use modern tech. Oh, it's the left wingers are the ones that are going to be cool because they're all like highly educated computer people, which is such a patronising view. Obviously, these guys, and Trump's people too, really good online, really great at picking up the latest tech, thinking about how to use it cleverly, developing memes, putting out very nicely made videos to get things stirred up, and they trade on controversy, they trade on outrage. That does well on social media, so they've got the platform's a good one for them quite naturally. So it's changing a lot. So I'm not so sure. If we go back to your question, Hope Not Hate has argued that there's this coming together of these different forces. I don't know if it's as coherent as that at this point. I think it's all kind of a big mess.
It's very interesting you say about kind of the use of social. Do you think that radical groups, not just one radical, but radical groups across the board are better at using new technology, or do you think that they're kind of excluded from mainstream media, mainstream technology, and they're not forced to look for new avenues?
Yeah, but that's the same thing.
Same thing, I suppose.
Yeah, that's the same thing. I think it's exactly both of those things. They've been excluded, or they believe themselves to be excluded from mainstream technology and mainstream media. So they're automatically looking for ways of using anything else they can to get the message out. Yeah. Or to evade detection in the case of the really extreme radical guys. Yeah. Let's use the latest anonymous web browsing. Let's use the latest encrypted messaging apps. And for the YouTubers, or for the political YouTubers, it was the Times and the BBC aren't listening to us. Well, then let's get onto YouTube and Facebook and start building our movement there. So they had a head start on everyone. Yeah. Because they were the early adopters of all this stuff. The English Defence League was the first group that really, in the UK, worked out how to use Facebook to create a political movement. And it would not have existed without Facebook. No way. All, especially anti-establishment movements, believe that social media gives them that true connection to the people, because it's not being controlled by powerful vested interests. So they also had a reason to especially like social media, believing it to somehow get them to bypass the corrupted media that they believe sort of runs society.
Well, a very closely related question, but do you think it's easier to run a radical and or extremist movement now than it would have been 20 or 30 years ago?
Yeah, I think it probably is, which is why you seem to have so many of them. But I think it's easier to set them up.
Yeah.
Like, it's very easy to set them up, get a few people out on the streets, cause a bit of mayhem, get some media coverage for it, create the impression that you're a big thing, but it's still very hard to maintain that long term, to maintain that interest, that enthusiasm, all that organisational work that you need to do to actually turn a small group into one that can make something really change. That is still very, very hard. And you know, spending a lot of time with groups like the EDL, the amount of work that would go into doing a demonstration, people don't realise it. Oh my God, Tommy Robinson himself would be up at 4 a.m. writing banners and phoning people up, checking that they're going to turn up.
Yeah.
And it's the same for the radical environmentalists. It's hard. It's still hard work. You must know, if you ever run an event and you put it out on Twitter or Facebook and everyone says, yeah, I'm coming, brilliant, it sounds amazing, loads of noise, and then no one turns up. Because getting people places is still quite, it takes a bit of an effort. So I think what we see is a fragmentation of groups. It's easy to set things up, get a blast. That might even make it harder to create a long-term, big kind of consensus movement that can change anything.
Okay. I mean, on the kind of the Trump movement specifically, and I guess maybe the Brexit movement as well, how important do you think social was? And also, kind of, I know it's a kind of interlinked thing, but the whole Cambridge Analytica thing.
They're two different things, I think. So, on one hand, it's like how important is social media for Trump to get his message out?
Yeah.
And very important. I mean, we all know he was very good at using Twitter to get headlines on Fox News, CNN. I mean, the coverage he got, the free coverage he got from newspapers and TV channels talking about his latest tweet or post on Facebook was worth billions of dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible, and cutting through in American politics is half the challenge. I mean, just brand recognition. Because most people, we have to remember, don't care that much about politics. But they just have heard that, Trump, he's that one, he's really in favour of the ordinary American, isn't he? He sticks it to the establishment. I'm going to vote for him. And so just to get that simple message across with these angry tweets is a very powerful thing. So that's one thing. And I think in a way he is the first truly social media politician.
Okay.
But Cambridge Analytica is different. That is the use of quite sophisticated, say sophisticated, a lot of people were doing this.
Yeah.
Cambridge Analytica aren't geniuses at this. I mean, there's a lot of companies that offer the same thing. And you speak to any digital advertiser, they'll say, what Cambridge Analytica, most of us are doing this stuff too. It's not that, we all thought that was kind of normal. So that's a different thing. I personally think that Cambridge Analytica were very important in winning the election for Trump, but not because they built some psychological warfare tool that manipulated millions of people. I just think they were very, very good at doing targeted adverts. They did good data analysis with mostly legally acquired data sets and did good targeted adverts in key states, targeting the right people just enough.
The blue wall kind of thing.
They just went past the blue wall and they won Michigan, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania all by less than 1 percentage point after having spotted early on that they could reach enough persuadable Trump voters to swing the state, even though everyone said it was impossible. And they shifted, based on Cambridge Analytica's analysis, they shifted a lot of their budgets into those 3 states.
Yeah.
That's smart. I think that made a difference. But that's not the same as some genius mind manipulators were subliminally tricking everybody. But I think they were important.
When it comes back to what you were saying at the beginning about kind of rise of authoritarianism, I mean, Trump obviously ran in some ways quite an authoritarian campaign in the sense he threatened to imprison his opponent on sort of trumped-up charges, no pun intended. He was at times advocating or at least sympathising with political violence. All that is very, very aggressive towards the media. Do you think Trump is fundamentally anti-democrat, and do you think that matters?
That's a bigger question. That's too big of a question for me. I find him to be slightly beyond definition.
Yeah.
Because it feels most genuine authoritarian anti-democrats have a consistent view about democracy and its weaknesses.
Yeah.
And especially the radical right had seen it as a sort of a complacent, decadent system of government. But that's a coherent ideology. I don't feel like Trump even has a coherent ideology. It's more sort of will to power and just get my thing. And you could say, I do what I want and I'll make sure it happens, and get rid of the judges and the bureaucrats that are in the way. And you could say that is an anti-democratic impulse, and I think it is. But I'm just not sure he's ever really thought about it enough to even consider himself an anti-democrat, because he'd then say, no, but I'm I'm a true believer in democracy.
Yeah.
So it's a hard question. It's actually quite a hard question.
I mean, one final question.
Yeah.
So reading through your books, I've been identifying various themes which threaten the established order, or the liberal democratic model, if you will. And the three I really picked out were technological change, income inequality, and concern over the level of migration, but both in Europe and North America. Yeah. Of those three, which do you think is the most dangerous and which do you think can be addressed most easily?
Oh, blimey. So inequality, immigration and technological change.
Yeah. If I was thinking about
the thing is, they're all related.
Yeah.
I won't go into the reasons, but your listeners can work it out. As all major trends often are, related in some way. It's really hard, because the problem I have is that I see all of them as being sort of tectonic plate shift change. They're not little things. They're enormous changes in how society is evolving, and that makes it hard for 5-year term governments to do anything about them. I mean, I cannot see how in the long term we will stop immigration if climate change. I'm sorry to keep going about climate change. It makes it sound like this is one of my big bugbears, but it's not something I actually write about or campaign about even. But I think we are forgetting something when it comes to climate change, which is forget about rising seawater for a second, or the obvious effects. The other thing that it could also do is to stimulate the movement of millions of people. And when millions of people decide they're going to move, there's not really many borders that can actually stop them. Not unless you start introducing really draconian measures, which feel incompatible with the sort of liberal order that we've created. So I can't see how that is going to change. Technological change has a sort of life and energy of its own. I think governments can nudge it and steer it in one direction or another. Which means, I guess, income inequality is the one that we have the most chance of doing something about.
Okay.
But even that is a tricky one, as we know.
Yeah.
As we know.
I know I said final question, sorry, but one final question.
Right.
Obviously, the last couple of questions, we've been quite pessimistic. We've been discussing the risks and the dangers. What's the thing with the new technology which you most look forward to? And in terms of the dangers, how do you think they can be best kind of averted or dealt with or mitigated?
Yeah, we are pessimistic, but and I think that reflects a broader societal feeling.
Yeah.
But I also think we go in waves, so I think we'll get a bit bored of this pessimism after a while, and we'll start becoming more optimistic naturally, because I think that's how sort of people start bucking the trend and say, "Oh, why are we being so miserable? Come on, guys, there's amazing things going on here." So you have that ebb and flow of political debate. And the thing about Radicals, that book, there's an optimistic undertone there, which is societies change and evolve, and they move, and people change their views about things, and new movements pop up, and in response to problems, people are amazing at coming up with new ideas to how to solve them, and it gives society a life and an energy, which will happen. So we kind of, I say in that book, we're going into quite an exciting phase of politics. Has politics not been exciting? Yeah. Has it not been interesting? Has it not stimulated your ideas about how to organise society, because things seem like they're up in the air again, and now you can think, wow, there is an alternative to how society goes. What are they? What can we do? And it's a thrilling time to be involved in politics. So that's a cause for optimism, and I see a lot of it. I see a lot of it in the tech sector as well. A lot of people trying to build new things that are really exciting, new ways of using blockchain technology or cryptocurrency technology to make governments more transparent or to improve the reliability of voting systems. There's amazing things going on. But I guess the one thing that I personally can be excited about, you've probably heard it many times, is I think healthcare is going to be transformed by machine learning. I really do, and I feel like, just like the invention of penicillin, machine learning is going to massively improve how we diagnose and understand serious illnesses, and will develop much better advanced warning systems for especially cancer and Alzheimer's. You combine MRI scans with machine learning software, could you transform the understanding of the brain? And this is such an exciting time in that sector, which is good, because hoping that by the time I get to the age at which this is going to be a problem for me personally, all this amazing technology will have helped solve it. So there are lots of reasons to be excited. And the UK, with the data it's got from the NHS, has accidentally produced a goldmine of data that machine learning software. We have to be the world leaders here, because all of this runs on data. The NHS has donkey's years of data on all of us. And if we can work out how to use that, we're going to be world beaters, and we can export that around the world, because every country in the world is going to want to have access to this technology.
Okay. Well, Jamie, thank you so much. It's been really, really
pleasure.
Interesting. As I say, I really recommend your books. I'll put links for them in the description.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Thank you very much.